I guess the way to talk about this is kind of three parts. I mean, we'll talk a little bit about the game, and then I want to sort of talk about state of the program, and then I think we need to talk about what Mark Stoops said after the game. So let's start with the game. The game was a disaster. It was clear from the opening that Kentucky wasn't ready to play, and Louisville was significantly better. It was 20-0 at halftime, but honestly, it could have been 40-0. Louisville twice had drives stymied right at the end. They made a turnover. I mean, Louisville should have been ahead even more than they were in the second half. Kentucky got a glimmer of hope when they scored the touchdown to make it 20-7. Defense got to stop. You had a moment where Kentucky could get back in the game, and then Wilcox had his second fumble. 5 turnovers during the game. Obviously, you're not going to win with 5 turnovers. Stoops talked a lot about the 5 turnovers after kind of being the key, but to me, the 5 turnovers took a game where we were still going to lose and just made it to where we got blown out. Louisville was better. And for a person, if you have watched these games over the years, it's always been interesting to me with the Louisville games because Louisville's the one team we play that because they're in another conference, it's a good gauge kind of where we are. So there have been years where we're in the bottom half of the SEC but still beat Louisville, a team that's usually in the top half of the ACC, and you go, okay, well, that goes to show you. Not this year. I mean, if you start with, the year we beat Lamar, we lost the next year, but really start with that year and go on, you can see the decline of the Kentucky football program based on these Louisville games. I mean, we went from 3 or 4 years when they were really good, playing them neck and neck, winning some, losing some, to 4 or 5 years where we dominated, to now where we're getting dominated. And I would argue this Louisville team is not as good as the Lamar-era Louisville teams. And while better than the last few, I think they were just as talented, if not better, last year. And we beat them handily last year, and they beat us handily this year. So that's where we are. It was a disaster. And to Louisville, first time they've won in 6 years. Congrats to them. They deserve it. And they stomped us on our home field. So that's part one. Terrible performance all the way around. And a fan base, by the way, that still, while it didn't fill it up, still showed up. But that's 8 straight home losses against Power 4 teams. 8 straight home losses. You can never complain about the Kentucky fans when they've had to go 8 times to big games and watch 8 straight losses. All right, second part, state of the program. Let's assume that Mark Stoops had made no comments after the game. Let's assume we had no idea what the future of the program was, because I thought that might be the case. And I was going to sit here and say this. There has been a massive decline in the program, not just on the field, because I could make the argument that if you go 4-8 after the last 7 or 8 years, you say, you know what, that happens, right? Like he gets a year. Everybody has a bad year. I could make that claim, and I think I would feel good about it. The SEC's good this year. He gets a year. My problem, though, goes beyond the fact that they went 4-8. My problem goes to some more culture parts around the program. We didn't just go 4-8. We had games where we were not competitive. We were not competitive against South Carolina. We were not competitive against Florida. We were not competitive really in terms of trying to win the game against Texas, and then we were not competitive today. We lost to Vanderbilt at home for the second time in a row. Those are not just losses. Those are the program is not doing what it should do losses. But then you go and win at Ole Miss and you play Georgia to 1 point, which says to me you had the potential to be good, which gets to part 2, which is the culture around Kentucky football is broken right now. It just is. The culture, which was probably the best selling point for Mark Stoops. If you were if you were trying to say, why is Mark Stoops doing such a good job at Kentucky, you would point to the culture. You would point to his ability to play tough in the trenches. You heard the announcer today say, I'm shocked to watch Kentucky, I think he said, get whooped on the line of scrimmage. That didn't used to happen. And it's a culture problem. And the culture problem is extending way beyond just what we're seeing on the field. There has been a downgrade in what the staff has allowed from players, from just interactions in terms of coaches, interactions with the administration. There has been a massive drop, in my opinion, in the culture of a program that I thought was a model for how you run a program. In the last 2 years, I think it's taken a massive dip. The players have kind of been allowed to do whatever they want, and that has caused discipline issues that you see on the field. Not discipline issues where guys are getting in trouble, like we're not hearing a dude's getting arrested or anything like that, but just in terms of work ethic. Ask anyone around UK football. They'll tell you the guys don't work like a lot of them don't work like they used to. They'll tell you that guys are allowed to kind of do whatever they want. And a culture and a discipline that was there for a long time just is not there. And you can blame sort of NIL and all that, but other programs are finding a way to make it work. I think starting at the top, Mark Stoops has let the reins slip. He has let the things he was the best at, which was allowing a program where players felt free but also would still show up and do what they were supposed to. That's been gone the last 2 years. And all you got to do is ask anybody around the pro. They'll all tell you that. Ask players, ask coaches, ask administrators. They'll tell you that. And Mark's reaction to that has too often been to basically blame resources. And I will tell you, I have almost zero sympathy for the resources argument. You know, earlier this year, Mark had what I think was a whiny comment where he said, I've had to do this all by myself. I've felt alone, blah, 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 blah. To whatever extent that's true, that was the whiniest thing I've heard a coach say. A person who preaches personal responsibility to sort of say that was ridiculous. Now, Kentucky doesn't have the resources necessarily that other programs do. But they have more resources than they've ever had. And my bottom line is there's more talent on this roster than there's been in 4 or 5 years. Maybe not than there was the Josh Allen year, but there's a lot. I mean, the year we had like 7 guys get drafted. There may not be more talent on this group than that one, but there's more than there were the last couple years. And you've blown it. And you can't talk about resources when you gave your highest NIL payments ever in the last year. You just picked the wrong guys. And that's on you, and that's on the people that picked the guys. You got the wrong guys. You just did. Now, he acknowledges that after the game. But like when he was whining about resources earlier in the year, that's on you. That's on you. And I think Mitch Barnhart was slow to embrace NIL. I think that's a fair critique. I've made that critique many times. But you know what? Now things are different. You know, basketball has zero problems with it. And to the extent football has it, you got to look in the mirror. You got to look in the mirror and say, would you give a lot of money to what we just saw? You know, some of you guys out there I've done ads for, and I'm sure I'll continue to do ads for NIL funds for football. And some of you got folks give hard-earned $20 a month or whatever, and that's not easy for people, and you've done it. It's hard to, but like, does that feel deserved after what's happened? I mean, I get it. I get why people are frustrated. You know, the football fan base is different than the basketball fan base. A working class person in Kentucky can afford football season tickets. So you get a different set of people there. But it also means like it's not just all blue blood rich people there. It's people who like they have to sacrifice to go. And you got to give it back to them. And when I hear somebody making $9 million a year whine about it's hard, I roll my eyes more than I can say. I did the same thing with Calipari. Do not tell me you're making $9 million and it's hard. It's supposed to be hard. It's supposed to be hard. And you failed this year. So in terms of a state of a program, if I'd heard Stoops say nothing afterwards, I'd say, and I've said in the last few weeks, Mark, you need to look in the mirror and say, am I ready to do this? You need to look in the mirror and say, I've screwed this up. Not resources, not players, not you. You're in charge. When things slip, it's on you. You've let it slip. And you have to say, do I want to spend the next few years building it? Because as I've talked about, and I won't go into it today, the next 2 years are going to be the most important 2 years in college football in 25 years, probably since games started all being on television. I think there are like these moments in college athletics where things changed, going back to, the nationalization of the sport, to integration, to major conferences, to major television deals, and now I think this is the next one, which is the professionalization of the sport. And at different times, every time, different programs have stepped to the lead and others have retreated. And so the question becomes, now that we're entering, change 5, Mark, are you ready to be a part of that or not? And if the answer is yes, okay, but you got to know what you're getting into. And you can't say like, oh, I don't like this anymore. This is what it is. Which gets me to number 3, which is Mark's comments. Now, I'm going to play you. He said a lot today. He said Cutter will be back, that Cutter is the future. He said that there's going to be a lot of turnover in terms of the roster. I think hinted maybe some turnovers in coaching. I may be reading something into that, but I kind of read a little bit into that. But I think the most important comment is a comment about his future. And I've gotten Billy to pull the clip. He talked about it to the media, but I thought wasn't as direct as he was with Tom Leach. So here, I'm going to play the entirety of what he said because I think it needs all the context. This is Mark. When I don't think he was asked about it. Well, we'll just play it. This is Mark Stoops.
Have a lot of those player conversations already happened, or do they happen tomorrow or the next day?
They will happen in the next couple of days. The staff, we already had plans all week to be in tomorrow to get ourselves exactly on the plan that we want. And there's going to be players that we asked to go somewhere else and go play somewhere else, and there's going to be guys that we asked to come back. There's going to be new incoming freshmen. There's going to be incoming portal, and there's probably going to be some surprises. Let's be honest, and there's going to be a surprise, and again, we won't flinch. It's not like we're going to like it or anything. If you lose somebody you don't want to, but it's not the end all be all. It's like there's ways to replace everybody, and I don't want to say that about me right now because everybody will jump on that bandwagon and tell me to replace me. Everybody wants to replace me right now, but I'm not going anywhere. My butt is going to work tomorrow, and I'm going to try and I'm going to be motivated as hell to get this thing fixed and get better. So anybody that's wishful thinking that I'm not going to be able tomorrow has got the wrong wish, because my butt will be in my office, and we will. I can promise you, we will attack this off season. And there's nothing fun or lighthearted about it. But I know, if you can't laugh at yourself for a moment, you know what I mean. Then heck, I know it hurts. I said it in my press conference. I so appreciate the fan base. They've been there every game, even through today. It's been disappointing. I accept that responsibility. I'm sorry I disappointed them and let them down in many ways. But we've had a lot of great moments, and I can promise you I'm pretty optimistic that we're going to get back to that.
All right, so very definitive. I'm coming back. I want to come back. Even sort of says it's wishful think. For those of you that wishful thinking that I wouldn't, you're going to be disappointed. It was a very Mark Stoops-esque quote. Some of it I actually think is positive. He does in that accept responsibility, but he also is defiant in the you want me gone, I'm not going anywhere. And I think Mark, again, unlike Cal, he understands that there's a large part of the fan base that doesn't want him here. I won't say doesn't like him, but doesn't want him here anymore. He acknowledges that. But he's also defiant in it and says, I'm going to be here. And I expect him to be here. But for me, when I hear that quote, I don't know. I'm not inspired for excitement. I think arguing he should be fired is now a waste of a conversation because I don't think he's not going to be fired, and he's not going to resign, at least according to him. But I also think it's a little ridiculous to say it's lighthearted, people with wishful thinking. Let's be real. Mark considered and maybe seriously tried to leave here last year. I think things in the last moments, I think maybe he had second thoughts, A&M had second thoughts, but regardless, it's clear he seriously entertained the notion of leaving here. And if he had, we would have all just had to accept it, right? Well, then you just got to get over that fans are going to seriously entertain the notion of changing from you because you did the same thing last year. And you should have. But it's also understandable that fans are like, I just don't feel it. So I'm left with this, which is Mark Stoops is going to be the coach next year. And I think that's almost certain. I don't think we're going to have a situation like Arkansas that came and got Cal. I don't think there's going to be a program come and get Mark. Maybe I'll be wrong, but I don't think that's going to happen. It's hard for me to feel excited by it. I don't think he said the wrong thing. I think he said fine things, but I worry. I worry about the culture. I'm glad he says it needs to change, but he needs to understand that he is why it didn't work. He allowed a changing. He started making the staff his buddies and not just the best of the best. And that's all got to change. We have, I think, at most positions, not all, but at most positions, a below-average coach. I think we have an above-average defensive coordinator. I don't really know what to think of Bush Hamden, but sort of like I don't really know what to think of Brock Vandegrift. I'm not sure any of it really mattered. That offensive line was so terrible, and if that coach is back, then I don't really know how he's serious about making changes because that was a disaster. But when it comes to decision-making on who you get, they were below average across the board at most coaching positions and most player positions. So I don't feel a sense of excitement about the future. I just don't. I hope it works out. I think he's going to be the coach no matter what. I'm going to be interested to see. He says there's a plan for resources. Well, there is a plan long term, which is this $22 million settlement. But that's not going to be in place next year. So are there resources for next year? Are they going to be able to raise the money to go get players in the portal? I don't know. He would know better than me. Maybe he will. How many of these dudes are going to leave? Is this going to be an attractive place for people in the portal? And then what if Brad White goes? Vince Marrow's had many opportunities. What if he goes? He talked a lot about continuity on the offensive side, but I kind of wonder, was there an implication Brad might go do his own thing? Well, if you were to say to me that we get Mark back without Brad White and maybe without Vince or without pick a couple other people, well, all of a sudden, what are we doing? So I'm nervous about it. I don't think discussing, though, should he be fired, I just think like it's been decided. I have the feeling like I did when Mitch and Cal did that TV interview. And I remember I was eating at Skyline when I saw the interview, and I said, well, Cal's going to be here, so whining about him being here is really not productive anymore. He's here. Well, of course, that ended up changing. Stoops is here. He's the coach. And now the question is, what's this program going to look like in 4 weeks? And I just say buckle up because I don't know. I don't know what players are going to be here. I don't know what coaches are going to be here. Signing day is Friday. Their star running back is visiting Missouri today that's already committed to Kentucky. Will we lose him? Like, we have the 23rd ranked recruiting class. Will you be able to keep it? Can you bring in an offensive line? I'm going to assume Deion Walker, Barian Brown, Dane Key are gone. I don't even know what Brock Vandegrift's future is. I don't think it's at Kentucky, but I'm not certain he's even going to continue playing football. Who knows? There's just a lot ahead, and Mark Stoops is going to be the coach, but beyond that, who knows? 859-280-2287. We're going to open up the phones. That was longer than I meant to go, but there's a lot to say. We will take your calls. We leave tomorrow for our trip. Just so you know, I'm going to go ahead and prepare you. On the trip, we'll give you all football news, but I'm not spending a week on one of my favorite things to do of the year being upset. We're going to be enjoying it and talking about basketball. So get all the upset out today because I do think we have the right for people to be angry. Let's take a break. 859-280.